I'm Matt Bichard here in Dallas for Nareit's REIT World 2017. Joining me today is Greg Steele, the head of REIT investment banking with Capital One. Greg, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
So now we're a little over 11 months into the year. Looking at the real estate capital markets, have there been any developments that surprised you?
You know, there have been a couple of things that have surprised us this year. I think the sort of overarching theme of that surprise has been around technology and the impact of technology on real estate. If you think about, on the one hand, the retail space, retail REITs have been dealing with a spike in tenant bankruptcies and just sort of the general impact of e-commerce on their businesses. Those stocks have traded off. They're on average, if you look at the shopping center REITs, about 85% of net asset value this year, and their capital raising has been down about 50% year on year. If you look at other categories of real estate, though, within the REIT sector that have benefited from technology, and you think about industrial, and you think about the cell towers and data center REITs, those have really been trading very well. They're up at about 112% of net asset value on average, and their equity raising activity has been about twice last year's pace. So these are not necessarily things we didn't expect, but the divergence in performance and the impact of technology has been really profound this year.
Now, shifting to IPOs, what do you see in that pipeline for next year, and are there any sectors that are really ripe for new companies?
When it comes to IPOs, we've had a relatively quiet year on the IPO front, and I think that's, at least in the last few years, have been relatively quiet. I think because we're in a mature part of the real estate cycle, I think we're going to see investors continue to be very selective about which companies get into the public realm. They're going to look for management teams with public company experience. They're going to look for companies that have sufficient scale and the right cost structure to compete with their public company peers. And I think they're going to look for an attractive entry point. They're going to look for a meaningful discount to the underlying real estate on the balance sheet. So I think we'll continue to see investors be very selective about which companies come into the public side. Having said that, I think that there's certainly room for more industrial, there's room for more data centers, more of the technology-driven real estate that I mentioned before. I think we could certainly see more of that in the public REIT sector over time.
And lastly, we've seen a fair amount of foreign capital coming into U.S. real estate lately. What do you think is driving that, and how do you see it impacting the real estate market?
We've always had a lot of foreign capital in our real estate market, and I think as long as the U.S. provides the kind of diversity, the kind of depth, and the kind of liquidity that it provides, and the kind of returns that we've been providing, I think we'll always have a lot of interest from foreign investors. But I think what we've seen this year, though, is a bit of a lot of it goes in cycles in terms of who we see active and who is not active. If you think about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a very heavy investment pace coming from China. We saw Anbang acquire the Waldorf Astoria as an example. This year we're seeing the Chinese investors take their foot off the gas. I think we've had about a third of the rate of investment from China this year that we had 2 or 3 years ago. But we're still seeing very robust volumes from Canadian investors, from the Netherlands and from Singapore as an example. Think about the take private of Parkway Properties by the Canada Pension Plan, and that's an example of the kind of continued interest that we're seeing from sovereign wealth funds and from foreign pension plans in U.S. real estate, and we think that's going to continue for quite a while.
Greg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Matt.
For more information about Nareit's REIT World, be sure to visit Nareit's website, REIT.com.